Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mei Lee Show. Glad to have you here. So for those of you who are actually watching on video, you see this long side braid I have. So for those of you who are listening, I have this long side braid. First time I've worn my hair like this on the show. And this is my COVID hair. It's because I haven't gotten a haircut in so long, and my hair grows really fast anyway. So this is really probably the longest my hair has been in a very long time. So when I braided my hair the first time like this, I do this often now because it's just easy. I looked in the mirror and I was like, hey, wait a minute. I'm like the Asian Elsa from Frozen. See, this is what happens when I spend too much time at home. I just start going insane. Anyway, don't worry. I'm not going to start singing Let It Go. Okay. Now, the purpose of today's episode is a COVID-19 update. And the reason why I want to do this episode is because we're going in the wrong direction, right? I mean, we've been in this for now several months. It's the end of June. At least today it is when I'm recording this. And we're still going through it. And in fact, we're going the wrong way. Cases are spiking in different states, including here in California where I am. And people are starting to behave as if the virus is gone. We've seen it. We witness it. We hear about it. You see the viral videos. You see, people out and about, no masks at bars, packing it in, and even going to concerts now. It's not a good situation, and we're definitely going the wrong way. So here are the numbers as of today. Worldwide, there are over 10 million cases now of COVID-19, and the number of deaths is over 500,000. In the U.S., the number of cases is almost 2.6 million now, and the number of deaths is 127,000, and that keeps climbing. And of course, the number of cases keeps climbing. More than half of the states in the U.S., numbers are going up, including California here. And so some states and some regions are having to start going backwards again. They're starting to shut things down again, which is exactly the opposite of what we all wanted. We all did this because we wanted to move forward. So it's alarming to me because I feel like people, I know that we're all frustrated, right? We all have been cooped up and pent up, and we all want to get out, and we all want to restart the economy. But it's as if people just are absolutely ignoring the guidelines that will help us all get back to a sense of a new normal that will allow us to do the things that we have not been allowed to do for the last several months. But the more we learn about this virus, the more frightening it is, and the more people should adhere to the guidelines. But again, people are doing the opposite. It's strange. So here's a little bit of research I did in terms of what we know now and what researchers are telling us about how much they know. One cardiologist, and he's the director of Scripps Research at the Transitional Institute in La Jolla, California. He said, quote, "We thought this was only a respiratory virus. Turns out it goes after the pancreas. It goes after the heart. It goes after the liver, the brain, the kidney, and other organs. We didn't appreciate that in the beginning." Okay. Then other researchers are finding there are blood clotting disorders that can lead to strokes and extreme inflammation that attacks multiple organ systems. The virus can also cause neurological complications that range from headache, dizziness, loss of taste or smell, to seizures and confusion. And other doctors have said, an estimated 1 out of 10 people who have had COVID may experience prolonged symptoms. And this is whether or not you were hospitalized or you just had a mild case, okay? One doctor said if you previously ran 5K 3 times a week and now feel breathless after a single flight of stairs, or if you cough incessantly and are too exhausted to return to work, then the fear that you may never regain your previous health is very real. Okay, so these are long-term effects that could affect anyone, even the healthiest person who gets a mild case of COVID, because they still don't know what these long-term effects could be. And then, of course, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Love him. I mean, he's like the only guy who's trying to tell us the truth about everything. He says, you know, the vaccine is not foolproof, right? We're on this fast track of trying to develop the vaccine for COVID-19. But he just recently said, quote, the best we've ever done is measles vaccine, which is 97 to 98% effective. That would be wonderful if we get there. I don't think we will. I would settle for 70 to 75% effective vaccine. Okay, so he's saying we're not going to get to the 90% plus percentile of effectiveness for the vaccine. The problem with that is, with that lower percentile of effectiveness, he also says there is still this anti-vaccination movement, the anti-vaxxers, right? And a poll that CNN did just last month found that 1/3 of Americans said they would not try to get vaccinated against COVID, even if it were low cost and really available. 1/3 of Americans won't get vaccinated. So therefore, what does that tell us? That tells us that even with the vaccine, we're never going to get herd immunity with that many people not wanting to get the vaccine. And then on top of that, of course, people not following guidelines of wearing masks and, you know, social distancing. So, you know, I mean, I don't want to be a pessimist, but it sounds like we're kind of screwing ourselves here with the combination of all of this. And therefore, with this first wave not even going away, you know, people are like, oh, what about the second wave? We're not even out of the first wave. Okay. So it's just going to compound. All of these problems are going to compound and just make it an even bigger problem than it already is. One last fact before I get to the interviews. Apparently scientists are also studying the COVID-19 virus as it's been here now for several months. And apparently they're saying that the virus is mutating. And this is from one of the articles. The mutation doesn't appear to make people sicker, but a growing number of scientists worry that it has made the virus more contagious in its mutated form. Again, all the more reason to take precautions that have been laid out. But there is this strange, messed up resistance going on. So let's get to the interviews with the three doctors on the show. So I actually recorded these interviews on Friday, the 26th of June. So keep that in mind. So I'm just going to now start these interviews, all three in a row with these doctors, and then I'll come back at the end of the show. Celine, hey, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. How have you been?
Well, you know, hanging in there like all of us, right? And can't believe that it's still going and that, you know, we're still dealing with this virus and the pandemic. I mean, it seems like forever ago that we spoke. It was only back in March, but a lot has happened since then. And I remember when I spoke to you back then, it was really bad in New York. At the time, and as we know, it was the epicenter. So, tell me what has changed in the last few months for you since we last spoke.
Yeah. So in March, I remember I had a lot of feelings of not being prepared and not knowing exactly what would happen when the peak hit. Yeah. I know I felt the peak mid-April. Okay. So when we did last speak, it was all a lot of, yes, numbers were high, but there was also a lot of anxiety surrounding where we would head.
Yeah.
And after the peak, things, started to die down a little bit. It took a few weeks. And now our numbers are maybe 1 to 2 new diagnoses a day. We weren't really seeing that high acuity like we were before.
Right.
And it's really very manageable now. So
tell me what
distancing worked.
So tell me what happened at the peak, because like you said, you hit the peak in mid-April. So what did you experience at that time? I mean, you're now saying 1 to 2 diagnoses, which is nothing. What was it like at the peak for you?
We have numbers for the peaks and for the hospitals, but it really doesn't put anything into perspective. Like, I tell people, if you go on a crowded subway in New York at rush hour, you know that it's packed. You visually see all these people, but you can't really put a number to it. Yeah. And that's what it was like at the peak versus what it usually is. Maybe if you go at a subway at around 10 o'clock, and that volume is unlike anything I ever experienced. Yeah. And the acuity of patients was very high. Everyone needed oxygen. And it was the disease was so deadly that there were so many codes. I remember thinking at the end of one shift, I said, I coded more people in one shift than I did my entire residency. So it was just a lot of, I didn't even have time to wrap my head around it. I just kept working. I just felt like I was already very exhausted from, March, and it just continued, but there's nothing else to do. So it was just a lot of work.
I mean, Celine, I can tell from how you're trying to even describe what you went through that you still seem like you're processing it and kind of don't really even know how to describe what it was like, the intensity of what it was like.
I'm at a loss of words too, because, all of us physicians in New York, we've tried to verbalize over and over again what it's like, what needs to be done, that this isn't some hoax, that it's not just the flu. And we're tired. We're tired of sending that message out. We don't know how else to get it across. Right. We don't know how to describe how important it is for the rest of the U.S. who hadn't been impacted yet to understand what could be if they didn't, take the necessary precautions like socially distance and wearing masks.
Right.
And, it's interesting that we're reconnecting at this time where now the physician stories are starting to ramp up again in the media, because now we've got other epicenters and now other cities are experiencing what we did. And every time I read something now, I have to look at the place, I have to look at the date, because it just feels like the same things are happening over again. Right. And we've started, we're now where we started in February, beginning of March.
I mean, and it's disheartening to me when I see that there are other places that are spiking and they're starting to scramble, right, with these numbers, when we have known about this virus now since February, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, really did know about it, and then it started going up. And yet we're still seeing other places starting to spike now. So if I'm disheartened, and I'm not even a doctor, and I wasn't on the front lines like you, I can't imagine how you feel when you see what's happening in other places, as if they had like blinders on or something and they weren't paying attention. Tell me what you're thinking about all of this.
Yes, there's disappointment, but there's also a lot of anger and frustration, mainly because there's lack of leadership in our country to kind of organize and take this seriously. Yeah. Everyone is doing their own thing. It's everyone for themselves. It's this belief system that has somehow thrown away science. Yeah. And I'm really at a loss what to do anymore. Most scientists are at this point. Somehow facts have become opinions. Science has become opinions, and that's the bigger issue at hand. Because until we can mediate that as a country, and that obviously needs some stronger leadership, we won't be able to fight off this virus.
Yeah, it's like what Dr. Anthony Fauci has said. Even just recently, he said, I've never seen where science and data is not taken seriously. That I never thought I'd come to a point in my career where science and data were dismissed. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he was suggesting. And that's what you're saying too. It is remarkable, isn't it? Where we have a proven virus and you have seen it over and over again. You have witnessed it. You have dealt with it. You have seen how it ravages people and takes lives. And yet there's still this disconnect in our country, especially in our country, about how to deal with it, and that the fact that the seriousness of it actually exists. So yeah, anger and frustration, I don't blame you. So tell me that in New York, obviously you guys were the epicenter, and now because of the measures that were taken that were severe, you have been able to control it. Any fear now, though, that you guys are opening back up? Any concern that things are going to roll back and you're going to start seeing numbers go up again? What are you thinking? What are you hearing on the streets?
I definitely expect it to go back up. Multiple reasons. There was a lot of mass gatherings and protests. Even though people wear masks and it's outdoors, there's still an increased risk than when we were pretty much in lockdown.
Yeah.
And as now we're in phase 2, now people are allowed to, go back, eat at restaurants, and that is necessary. But I feel like people, now that it's not as prevalent, people are going to forget. People are going to go out. It takes 1 or 2 times, without the mask and being in groups larger than you should. And it's just going to be a slow climb.
Yeah.
It's going to have a slow climb back up. And also, as there's other hotspots in other states, I know there's a quarantine for people entering the tri-state area.
Right.
But I do expect, other visitors from hotspots to kind of amplify the disease prevalence again in New York. And that's going to continue happening as there are different hotspots in the U.S. until we have a unified response to this virus.
Right.
And I think the most important thing right now, and the easiest thing to do that is proven, is to wear a mask. And unfortunately, our administration doesn't even
no, they don't even do it themselves.
Standard, yeah. And nothing any of us can do at this point.
Yeah, it is amazing how the mask has become a politicized item for some reason, and it's for folks who refuse, they're saying it's their constitutional right of freedom when a health pandemic has nothing to do with that. Right. This is just about safety and health. So in terms of where you're working and the hospitals that you're working at, are you guys preparing for another wave, another spike? And if so, do you feel prepared? Because I remember, Celine, back in March, you guys didn't have enough PPE. You didn't have enough equipment. You didn't have enough ventilators. I mean, you didn't have enough of anything. And so certainly if there's going to be another spike or a second wave, like let's say this fall or winter, do you feel confident that this time around you guys will be better prepared?
Unfortunately, there's still a short supply of PPE, but we are better prepared in that the logistics on how to kind of separate COVID from non-COVID, also how infectious the virus is, and we're more comfortable with dealing with that. Yeah. So I feel like the second time around, we definitely are more prepared. In addition, we have some reusable PPE now that we can save for the second wave. And I'm actually working on some telemedicine, some new telemedicine that we can use so that when the second wave hits, we can take care of more patients at home and kind of bring healthcare outside and decentralize it from the hospital. So definitely more prepared, but as we see, we don't know where this is going to head.
Yeah.
At this point, with one disaster after another, I don't think any of us could have imagined how out of control this could have gotten.
And how extensive, and the fact that numbers are going up again. And that's what's so disappointing, I guess, is that after all these months of all of us on lockdown and trying to be careful and trying to control it, all of a sudden the numbers are going back up as we open up, as if people think that the virus is gone. It's not gone. It's still there. So again, it's a psychological sort of effect, and that's taking place right now versus behaving logically, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, Celine, I don't know.
I mean, anyone who has the answer right now is lying, because we are right now, it feels like everyone for themselves. There's so much chaos on what is right to do versus what is not.
Yeah.
And, I've taken a step back, and kind of tried to focus on myself and my mental well-being, because it's a strain for all of us who are used to making sure that all of our patients are well protected and safe. And, a lot of us feel like failures as physicians, unable to do that right now.
Wow. Okay. That's kind of a strong statement. Let me ask you then a more personal question about that. I'm sure it's frustrating, and I'm sure at the peak you were like, oh my God, I don't know if I can handle this. So have you thought during this time of dealing with the virus at all that, this is something that I just don't want to be part of anymore? I mean, I'm not questioning your commitment as a doctor and a health provider, but when you see that people are just not willing to work with you, and almost to the point of willingly endangering frontline workers with their selfish behavior. I mean, I get angry for you guys. I really do. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You should be turned away from the hospital if you show up, because how dare you put these people in danger because of your reckless behavior? So if I feel that way, I'm just wondering how you guys feel.
I never got to that point. I don't really have anger for people who really, I see them as misinformed or maybe a little bit ignorant, and I don't blame people for that. And it's not the first time that we have, feelings like that we have to fight. I've had people who are patients who are racist, patients that do terrible things, and I don't even see through that. We try and get over our biases and do our job, and this is no different. But there is a risk that, I felt if we didn't have enough PPE, if I couldn't ensure my own safety, there's no reason why I should go to work and, have harm to myself. And, I have asthma, so I always worry what could happen if I got the virus. And luckily I have not.
Yeah.
I've been able to stay healthy and protect my loved ones here at home.
Thank God for that.
But yeah, it's a definite struggle. I haven't had that so much in New York either, because everyone has seen it here or knows someone who has been affected.
Right.
So everyone's pretty good about wearing a mask.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, before I leave you then, what is a message you'd like for people to know right now about the situation and what they should be doing, just as an individual, from your perspective?
Yeah, so I want people to wear a mask. I want them to socially distance, and I want them to be critical of people who say otherwise. Unless all Americans are on the same page, this thing is going to be around and get a lot worse.
Yeah.
And it's gone on longer than it needed to because of the disconnect that all of us have had. And I want people to just have a little humanity and not think about how the mask affects them, because no, you can't become hypoxic or have low oxygen from wearing a mask. You can't. So
yep.
Just have a little humanity. Do it for your loved ones, your neighbors, and do it from not an angry perspective, but a loving perspective. And I think everyone in America needs to kind of remember that we're all human beings, and we have to come together to get through this. Otherwise, if everyone's sick, there's no economy. So the utmost importance is getting through this, and that can only be done by wearing masks, distancing. It's not going to be comfortable, but it's going to be a lot more discomfort down the long run if we don't all buckle down and do this now.
That's right. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. So thank you. And again, Celine, always thank you for your work and your dedication, your commitment. Thank you for not giving up. I mean, because we need people like you. So, and I'm glad to hear you're healthy. So please stay that way.
Yep.
And also take care of yourself. Do a lot of self-care. Right? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Celine. It's really good to connect with you again. And we'll of course keep each other posted, but thanks for the update.
Definitely. It's good to see you.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. You too. Okay. Now I'm going to speak to another doctor, and this doctor I actually met last month in May. And he was featured in my Heroes of COVID-19 episode because he had been featured in Time magazine as a hero, and also featured in a viral video that he shot himself to give us insight in like the day in the life of a frontline worker. And he is Dr. Chen Fu. He is a hospitalist at New York University Langone Center, but he's also a clinical assistant professor at the Grossman School of Medicine at NYU. So Chen joins me now from New York. Hey, Chen, so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you too, especially in light of this lessening COVID burden.
Well, for you guys in New York, for sure. And that's why I wanted to bring you back on the show, because we had talked, again, like I said, last month, and things had started getting better at that point in New York. And you were, telling me that it's a relief because obviously at the peak, it was a complete nightmare because New York was the epicenter. So now a month and a half or so later since I spoke to you, tell me what the situation is now, what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, of course. So in New York, things are certainly getting better. Our hospital has largely gone back to normal. In fact, a while back, I believe it was a week or two ago, we had only admitted one new COVID patient in our entire hospital.
Wow.
Down the streets of New York, people are starting to breathe life again.
Yeah.
They're going to the park. They're seeing loved ones. They're getting takeout from their favorite restaurants. And in large part, they deserve it.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. And New York, as we know, just started opening up again, right? Going into the next phase of reopening. And Governor Cuomo has been very, very cautious about this, saying, listen, if we need to go back, we will. So because of opening up, and that's been problematic in other areas, right? And that's why we're starting to see numbers go back up. Any fear in New York that that's going to happen there? Or do you see a difference in behavior amongst New Yorkers versus what we're seeing in other parts of the country?
That's a great question. I think partially because New York was the epicenter and because they have already experienced such a dire situation. Yeah. They're much more cautious. Everyone here is much, much more cautious. When I go out and walk around, everyone's wearing a mask. It's sort of a herd mentality. It gets to the point where if you're not wearing a mask, you almost feel naked and judged. And
good. I'm glad.
Yeah. No, it's a good thing to be it's a good thing to be trendy right now. A lot of
Yeah.
people are wearing mask patterns. It's fantastic, but more so than that, I think the situation does call for it. In New York City, at least, people have gotten to the point where everybody knows someone who's been severely affected by COVID. It's not just an idea anymore; it's a reality.
I
People
wonder,
have
yeah,
lived that.
I wonder if that's the difference. That may be a big difference. Is that in New York there were so many people who got COVID and so many people who unfortunately did not make it. That
Yeah,
your point being that it's unusual if you don't know someone who
yeah,
either didn't get it or didn't die from it, and so therefore that does change the attitude to a certain extent, doesn't it?
it does. In New York, COVID isn't a concept. It isn't an enemy on the horizon. It's not a political abstract. It's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if this great invasive Mongol horde has already passed through our city and is now making their way to the horizons of other places.
Right, right.
We are the news story that people hear about.
But when you see video and photos, because I think I saw it about a week or two ago, maybe, and again, Governor Cuomo commented on this. It was, I think, on the Lower East Side in the East Village,
Mhm.
and it was a street of bars, I guess, and it was packed. People were overflowing on the sidewalk and the street. Nobody was wearing a mask, it seemed, from what I could see from the video. And people were commenting on this as well. Drinking, socializing, no social distancing. So there's a little bit of that again. So it only takes not that many people to then do the community spread and be a carrier and all of that. So when you see things like that, does that still concern you?
It absolutely does, 100%. And
Yeah.
certainly there are pockets going around.
Yeah.
Um, it does concern me quite a bit, especially since the winter months, even though it seems like they're far away from us, are coming up on us.
Yeah.
And if it so happens that we get hit by a simultaneous flu season and COVID season, that's going to be disastrous.
Right. Tell me then, from a medical perspective and as a frontline worker, are you all preparing for another wave? Because we keep on hearing about that second wave that could be coming and that second spike, and what we are prepared for or what we're not. And again, listen, Chen, I'm hearing very mixed information about the preparedness and the stockpiles and, the numbers of PPEs ready to go. I'm hearing still that there are shortages in different spots, that where they feel like they would not be prepared if there were another surge.
No, absolutely. So here in New York, we're doing our best. In terms of the PPE, we do have a pretty good stockpile, at least at our hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of staff, we're starting to stagger people and pile them together,
Yeah.
especially in the winter months in anticipation of a possible second wave. We're trying our best to prepare, but this last COVID wave, we had the benefit of having flu season be over. If COVID hits during flu season, I can't stress this enough. If COVID hits us during flu season, and if it hits us as hard as it did before, or worse yet, harder, that is something that I don't think anyone can prepare for.
Right. God, that would be the worst case scenario, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, Chen, what have you now since learned from the Dr. Fu that started when this COVID outbreak happened to now? What, from a medical point of view, but also frontline worker and personally, what have you learned about this virus that you didn't know and could better inform others about what you yourself have learned?
So I hate to say it, but when this first started, I was one of the naysayers. I was one of those people walking around at parties telling folks that COVID was just a fool's dream. It wasn't a big deal, that the flu was much worse, and that folks in New York are just getting really eager and just getting overexcited at this.
Now, why did you feel that way?
Just seeing the initial numbers coming out of China and seeing the initial mortality rates, it convinced me enough, foolishly so, it convinced me enough that that perhaps this wasn't as big a deal as it actually was, even though we had physicians in China warning us, no, it's a really big deal here. We don't have accurate ways of diagnosing this right now. We're using CT scans and symptomatology, but it's a huge deal and we're getting overwhelmed. Right. People have a tendency to ignore bad news. Yeah. Okay. But one of the things that I really learned is that disease doesn't care what you think.
Yeah.
Disease just happens. Bad news just comes. And the best that you can do is just try your hardest to mitigate what might come and to be safe.
Right. Right. So from that point where you were sort of a naysayer, you obviously then experienced firsthand the severity of this virus and how mysterious it was and surprisingly still is, right? Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how we still don't know a lot about this virus. So again, tell me what you know now that you didn't know before and what you still don't know. I mean, what still perplexes you about this virus?
Yes, no, absolutely. So one thing that we do know is that this virus is serious. In fact, I remember the first patient that I saw where looking at his lungs on the CAT scan image, I thought to myself, oh boy, was I wrong. Oh boy, was I wrong. This is a very serious virus. So we've learned that this virus is serious. It shreds people's lungs like no other. Yeah. We've learned that it can infect people that feel like they're safe. So for instance, younger people with no health problems, right. It can infect them disproportionately and very severely. We've learned that it can have deadly consequences if you ignore it. Mm-hmm. And we've learned that it can inspire people to do good once it comes. Hopefully people will be inspired to do good before it comes. But we have learned a lot. There's a lot that we still don't know. Like you mentioned, we don't quite know the exact mechanisms by which it inspires the inflammatory reaction in the human body to have such a disproportionate response. We don't quite know if some of our best ideas are working yet. That's going to take some time. And I know at NYU we're working pretty hard analyzing data to come up with whether or not the trials and the treatments that we've been doing are working. And we don't yet know the long-term impact and consequences that this is going to have on the human body.
That actually was something that I was going to ask you about, because now we're hearing that even if you had a mild case of it, that we don't know what the long-term effects could possibly be. And a doctor today that I was watching on one of the news programs, she used the parallel of 9/11 and the on-site workers, the firefighters, the first responders who they were breathing in all of that dust, right? And then it was 10, 15 years later when they developed all of these ailments that were directly correlated to the time that they spent at the World Trade Center. And so she was saying this could possibly be a similar type of response, that a long-term effects may show up later in someone who thought that they just had a mild case, because we still don't know how the body will respond in longer term. So that's something that people should really be aware of as well, because again, Chen, I think people are reacting as if, oh, I'm not going to get it. Well, but if I get it, then maybe I'll just have a mild case and I'll be fine.
Yeah, no, people should not assume. So one thing that I tell patients, and this isn't exactly accurate, this is just an analogy. But people tend to have disproportionate responses to this virus, and no one can predict who will have it. It's almost as if people are allergic to the virus. And I use that in quotation marks because it's not the same kind of response, but you can think of it in the same way. We don't sort of predict peanut allergies. Most people, 99% of people, if they eat peanuts, it's fairly innocuous, it's delicious, but you're going to get that small proportion of people who, when they eat a peanut, are suddenly going to die or have their throats close up.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many medical conditions you have before. Some people just get unlucky. And that's the thing to understand about this disease, this massive inflammatory response that's attacking the virus. It's almost as if your body, it's not exactly an allergic response, but it's almost as if your body is responding disproportionately to it. And there's no way to predict who will do it. And like you mentioned, long-term sequelae, long-term effects of this virus are still unknown.
Right.
There's a small body of literature coming out in China to suggest that there's a possibility of reactivation of this virus. Similar to the way that tuberculosis can reactivate. And I saw a patient the other day who was in his 30s, no other past medical history, who was in a coma and probably won't ever wake up again because he got hit hard with this virus and he had strokes as an outcome. Like I mentioned, it's unpredictable what'll happen.
And he's in his 30s. No underlying health conditions.
Underlying health conditions.
But he got COVID and very severely, and now he's in a coma.
Yes, he got COVID very severely, had strokes as a consequence, and is now in a coma.
Yeah. So again, there's so much unknown and so much unpredictability still. And so that's what makes me, I don't think you get very angry, Chen, but I do. That's what makes me so angry when I see these people blatantly going out and refusing to wear masks and refusing to social distance and being so defiant about the seriousness of this. And just today, I mean, I'm going to tell the viewers, it's June 26th that we're doing this interview. Just today, we hit the highest number of cases ever during this pandemic in the US, 40,000 cases. We're going in the wrong direction, right? Yeah. And so it's getting more serious, and yet there's this huge gap of understanding or willingness to try to improve the situation. It's like those things are going completely the opposite way. So psychologically speaking, it's an interesting kind of disturbing trend, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually did my medical school in Houston, Texas. And so I've been seeing a lot of messages both on social media and personally of what it's like down there right now. And it's actually kind of uncanny because it almost feels like I'm a time traveler that's gone forward in the future for a couple months. I've seen what will come and am now shouting at people to prepare and be careful. Yesterday, the Texas Medical Center, which is the largest medical center in the world, it's a medical center that is so big that they have their own newspaper and they have their own orchestra.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. It has its own zip code. It is far and away the largest medical center in the world. They just ran out of ICU beds.
Wow.
As of yesterday, the entire medical center.
How many beds do they have? ICU
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I can check on that for you.
But if it's the biggest hospital in the world, they must have a lot. And for them to run out?
More than we have combined in Manhattan, I would estimate.
Wow.
Again, I'm going to have to fact check that. I'm not super certain. But I trained there, and I can tell you it is not – everything is big in Texas.
Yeah, that is true.
The medical center is no exception to that.
Wow.
If they ran out of ICU beds, then that – is a problem.
Yeah.
Being a time traveler in the future now, I do want to extend a warning to people living in these states that are being disproportionately affected. Texas, California, my home, Florida,
Arizona,
all these different states. It's a little bit too late just to say be careful.
Yeah.
A little bit too late just to say wear a mask at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But think about the people that you care about and do your best to protect them by staying away.
Yeah. We hear this every day, Chen, but there's some sort of strange disconnect with these folks who feel like they don't want to adhere. There's some sort of strange disconnect in the way they're thinking. And I sometimes I just want to dismiss it as pure selfishness, because I keep hearing from people, even just a friend of mine I was speaking to, who may not be my friend for much longer because of his attitude. He was saying, well, I'm not going to get it and I'm healthy. And I'm like, you're just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about the fact that you could pass it to others unknowingly. And so that attitude makes me completely insane.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that 38-year-old that I saw recently thought the same thing, that he wasn't going to get it and that he'd be okay. He's not okay.
Yeah.
It is kind of perplexing to me because even folks who don't believe in war will still wear body armor on a battlefield. It doesn't matter how likely or unlikely something is going to happen.
Right.
I live in a pretty safe neighborhood, but I still lock my doors, kind of a thing. But I think the politicization of this virus is doing no good for anybody, and I hope, I sincerely do hope that people can be safe.
Chen, did you ever think there come a day when a virus and health would become a divisive subject and a political topic that divided people's response? I mean, that's what's so astounding to me. We're talking about a health pandemic, and people are trying to use it as a tool to differentiate your political standing or your liberal or right-wing leanings or your constitutional rights. That's what's pretty amazing to me. So as a doctor, I'm sure you're like, wow, I'm not supposed to be political in any way. All I'm trying to do is save lives. And I'm having to argue with people who are claiming that this is their right not to wear a mask. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's just so ridiculous. I have to laugh.
I tend to be pretty apolitical by nature. And it's like you said, you'd think that a pandemic situation would be absolved of any form of politicization, but here we are.
Yeah,
that's okay. We have to deal with it.
Right.
I have been talking with some patients, some physician friends who work primarily in a clinic setting, and they've been talking about how mask-free requests have been at an all-time high for them. Doctor's notes for the ability to walk through society and walk through shops without a mask. And that's,
you mean like, so they want the doctor to write almost like a prescription saying this person is exempt from wearing a mask.
Yeah. And
unbelievable.
A lot of my doctor friends have been struggling with how to deal with that.
Oh my God.
It's clearly we all read the evidence and we know. But it's tricky to even have to deal with that on some degree.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing again. I can't help it because it's so ridiculous to me. Look at my dogs are just like coming here because they're like, that's ridiculous.
So
I know. This is what they do. They know when I'm doing the show and they literally want to be on camera like this. Is that hilarious?
Gosh.
Look at them. But I think they're also sensing the fact that I'm getting riled up about this. Wow. So this is what's happening on the ground for you guys, is that not only are you trying to deal with the health issue and trying to combat this virus, which is still very much at hand and still very much a problem and obviously very much a growing problem. And now you're having people say, doctor, can you write me a note because I don't feel like wearing a mask?
Yeah. In other states. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's definitely disheartening as well. So let's talk about a little bit of hope then. I know you also do research at NYU. Is your research does it have anything to do with the current pandemic? Or you okay? Tell me then what you're working on. Tell me what you're researching.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So right now we're actually taking all of this massive amount of data that we have on COVID-19, and we're trying to organize it in a digestible fashion.
Okay.
Big data is confusing in many ways, and I'm learning about the nuances with how to struggle with it, but it provides us with such a powerful weapon. For instance, we are seeing trends in our data, things like how certain populations may be more vulnerable. Obviously, elder people, folks who are more obese, we've been seeing, but also patients with diseases like cancer. And we're also seeing what it is that they die from more often. And using all this information, we can figure out methods to treat patients better, more effectively. For instance, if I see that somebody is dying more from blood clots or anything like that, we can start people on blood thinners as soon as they hit the door, or if their blood clotting levels hit a certain point.
Right.
And we can see whether or not that's helpful and whether or not that saves lives. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're learning from our mistakes, and we're learning from all of the things that we may have done wrong and what we did right. And we're trying to figure out a way to condense that into nice little buckets of information to send out to the world so that they don't have to make the same mistakes we did.
Right.
That's the research we're working on right now. In a
digestible manner, because I think you're right. So much data, so much scientific data, medical data for the average person, we're not going to be able to even comprehend. So that's great that you guys are trying to do that and make it make sense to the average person, so that therefore they are armed with practical guidelines and information in an organized fashion. So terrific. I'm glad to hear you guys are working on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, Chen, before we go, if I could just ask you one last thing, tell me what you think is sort of a hopeful outlook right now. I mean, obviously there's so many people working on a vaccine, and, they're in various levels of clinical trials, and it seems like we're getting more sort of therapeutic drugs that are, being experimented with varying levels of success. So is really the answer ultimately to get that vaccine?
Yeah. No, that's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
With a vaccine comes a feeling of safety.
Right.
And even if we hit a point where, God forbid, everybody in the United States gets infected with COVID at some point, it's going to be a sort of gray zone as to when people are going to feel safe again.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the best answer is to have immunity to the vaccine without have immunity to the virus without actually getting the virus. And a vaccine is the answer to that.
Right. Well, let's keep hoping that we can get that sooner than later. But until then, like you and I are in agreement, obviously, people have to take this seriously. It ain't over. It ain't even close to being over. And we can't act as if, woohoo, it's party time, and just get back to normal. We have to accept this new normal that may be forever our new normal. Yeah. But listen, Chen, I do want to leave you with this. After you were on my show, I got so many comments from people saying you had the most calming voice and demeanor. And I even told you that when I was interviewing you, you have this old soul kind of, sort of aura about you. So it's so good to talk to you, and I'm sure people will enjoy listening and seeing you again. So thank you so much for joining me again.
Well, thank you so much, May. It's truly, truly an honor and a pleasure every time. I really mean that.
Well, I'm sure I will speak to you again at some point, but until then, please stay healthy and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
You too, May, honestly.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, now we're actually going to come to the other coast, which is the West Coast, where I am. And unfortunately, California is one of the states that has been experiencing an uptick in COVID cases. And so I wanted to talk to a doctor who is dealing with it and has been dealing with it since the beginning. And her name is Dr. Meena Makhijani. She is a geriatrician affiliated with UCLA Medical Center and chief of staff of the Motion Picture and Television Hospital. I interviewed Meena several weeks ago for a different event. And she was so great, I had to invite her to come on the show. So she joins me now. Meena, hey, good to see you again.
Hi, May. Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I definitely wanted to get back in touch with you, having spoken to you several weeks back. You had told me stories at that point for a different event. Because you're a geriatrician, you obviously deal with the elderly. And as we know, COVID hits the elderly exceptionally hard. And you told me some heartbreaking stories about dealing with some of your patients, some of whom didn't make it and others who were suffering so badly. Tell me how things have changed for you in the past several weeks to now.
Sure. So when I spoke to you, we had an active COVID unit at the nursing home where I work. And so it was just such a horrible time. We had already lost several of our residents, we call them. You know, they live here. It's like a big family. So we had lost several of them, which was just so heartbreaking and so difficult to see. And we had so many others who were quite sick with COVID, but then luckily ended up recovering. So since I talked to you, we actually closed our unit, which was just such a tremendous celebration for us to be able to do that, to have people recover and go back home, meaning to their nursing home, but out of this, designated COVID unit.
Right.
So that happened just about 3 weeks ago. And so it's been such a relief. However, we are all with bated breath all the time because just what we're seeing all over the country, definitely in California, we don't know when this is going to happen again. And I say is because the chances are pretty high that we would have a resurgence just on this campus.
I mean, numbers don't lie, right? The data is showing that COVID cases are going up again in California and LA County especially, with more cases. And we're hitting, record numbers again. And so from a medical point of view, you having been on the front line and continuing to be on the front line, this is not good news. I mean, you don't want to go through this again.
Exactly. And California just had its highest numbers ever, like for, 1 day numbers, 1 day increase, I should say, of positive cases. So that's a very bad sign. I mean, and this is months in. Right. So exactly. I don't want to go back there. I don't want this to happen to anybody, let alone right here where I work. But just in our local area, so many of the assisted living facilities and nursing homes are getting hit now with their first outbreaks. They might have, survived the kind of earlier wave of this, of this first wave, but now they're getting hit. We're just seeing that left and right.
Oh man. Okay. So they hadn't even gone through this yet.
Exactly.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, when I spoke to you last time, we were talking about the fact that you guys were all scrambling because you didn't have enough PPE and, ventilators and facilities and things like that. Do you feel better prepared this go round? Because of course now the fear is if there is another surge, and if there's a second wave, and Governor Newsom is basically saying, hey, man, we're not even through the first wave yet. Don't even talk about the second wave, right?
Exactly.
So we have to remember that we have not even gotten over the first wave yet. So what about preparation? Is that something that all of you feel like you're better prepared or you're more aware, or what's the status of that here?
I definitely feel that we're better prepared in the sense when this hit us, it was just like out of nowhere for us. Of course, this had started in other parts of the world, so we had some awareness. But in terms of any local facilities, whether they're nursing homes like where I am or whether they're local hospitals, I mean, we just had to start from scratch. Everybody had to scramble and see what do we need to do to protect ourselves? What do we need to do to treat the patients? I mean, we were just learning from each other, speaking to others online or, friends that we know, colleagues, just to figure out, what should we be doing here? And so, of course, there was the huge issues that you're aware of with PPE shortages because everybody used whatever little stockpile they had and you couldn't obtain more. I mean, because the whole world needed it. It was just such a problem with the supply chain of PPE. So, now that we're several months in and that there has been a few weeks of kind of quieter time in most areas, I hope that most facilities have been trying to order more supplies, kind of, prepare it, I don't want to say stockpile because that sounds so negative, but really, do analysis of what kind of numbers and needs that we did have already and kind of project forward with that. Again, assuming that we're going to be needing more and more. Even like right now in my nursing home, we're still wearing quite a bit of PPE when seeing our patients because we're not through it. And as we know, we, meaning the staff and employees, are the ones who are bringing the infection in to the campus. The campus has been locked to visitors since March. No family members, nobody's been able to come in. That's the case at most nursing homes, most assisted livings, and most hospitals still, where visitors cannot go in. Of course, that's heartbreaking for the patients to be alone, but at the same time, we know that's the only way that we can hope to keep the virus out. It still gets in anyway. So, from all of these lessons that we've learned firsthand, unfortunately, I would say we're a lot better prepared. But some of the same issues will remain, like PPE shortages might happen again. Just because, again, we're all getting hit.
Right. I mean, look,
we're going to be needing this.
Dr. Celine Thum, who I spoke to earlier in New York, she was saying that she is fearful that they're not going to have enough PPE because they really don't have a huge storage of the equipment. And if there is another surge, like we're seeing in, for instance, Texas, Texas is almost at capacity already in terms of ICU beds and respirators. So they're already seeing this again. I mean, it's like a repeating nightmare.
Exactly. It's just horrific. I think Texas, as of yesterday, their largest hospital system, their ICU was 100% already, 100% capacity. And yes, not all of it was COVID cases. I think it was about 26% were COVID cases, but still, they're full. What are you going to do? Throw people out of the ICU if other COVID patients come in? And how do you, again, protect, yourself and the other patients who are there? I mean, it's just a really horrific situation already, and we can expect that it will intensify.
Well, from a frontline worker, doctor, medical perspective, I would imagine that all of you guys are so exhausted. And again, I've been speaking to the other doctors, and they feel that fatigue, that mentally, physically, that they're finally able to maybe take a breath for a second, but then they see what's happening, right? They see that, oh my God, it's coming back, and people are not paying attention. People are acting as if, COVID is gone and it's summer and wow, let's go out and go to the bars and not wear masks. And, and I'll say this first, Meena, they were very, how shall I say it? They were very politically correct in terms of trying to address this issue. But go ahead and rip into it if you want, Meena, because I personally am just furious every time I see this behavior. I have to ask you, just like I did the other two, how do you feel when you see this behavior out there?
Oh, I mean, I'm absolutely shocked. I'm angry many times. I'm just thinking, like, what are people thinking? It's just so shocking. Like, I'm not out and about, so I'm not seeing it firsthand. All I see is when I'm driving from work to home, basically. And I still barely go to a grocery store, but, the few times I've briefly run in, California is mandating masks even indoors. So for the most part, what I've seen is okay. But then I have passed by homes that seem to have large gatherings going on outside. And mainly what I see is on social media. And I'm just so floored when I see people just posting like life is totally normal. And that's why actually today I posted, we are still in a pandemic. I mean, I feel like people have forgotten this, but it's like, I definitely, I just don't even know what to say about it to, like how people are not aware of this, And it's so funny, just about an hour ago, I got an alert, one of those, terror type alert things on my phone, like what they do.
Oh, okay.
And it said Ventura County, because I live on the border of LA and Ventura County, COVID, high number of cases. Please be cautious. Please wear a mask. And it's like, it's to that level where they're sending this out. I don't think they even sent it out before in the beginning of the first wave.
No.
And I'm actually glad they did that. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's, again, like well, we should know that we're in the midst of this, but
right.
apparently people don't. So
yeah. I mean, again, there's talk that if this trend continues, this terrible trend, that we may have to go back on lockdown, or we may have to go backwards again. And that's exactly what none of us want. I mean, why did we spend months in shelter in place to just chuck it all out the window? And go back, and think everything is okay. That's, I guess, again, this is a behavioral thing that is a lot deeper.
Right. It's so much deeper. You're right. And, I think that really would be a tragedy to have to implement a lockdown again, just because of, in terms of, people's livelihoods, businesses that would be affected.
Right.
So I just wish that people felt more personal responsibility to, act accordingly to help this, and to feel more of a community feeling. I mean, that's something that I've noticed. There was this viral video on CNN yesterday, which you probably saw, about the people at some town hall in Florida saying, "You can't make me wear a mask, and you're taking away my rights, and I can't breathe with this on," and and it's like, it's just. I mean,
it's mind-boggling. No, it's absolutely mind-boggling. But Meena, as a medical expert, and you on the front lines again, trying to help people survive, right?
Right.
Do you get personally hurt by this behavior? Because again, people are putting you at risk. When people behave that way, they're not thinking about anyone but themselves. They're certainly not thinking about their loved ones, or who else they could give it to. And their loved ones might very well be the people who you have to care for eventually, because they're elderly or whatever. So
exactly.
I wonder if you take personal offense to this sometimes, because I would.
No, it's an interesting question. I mean, I do take tremendous offense to it. And I haven't thought about it so much on a personal level, but of course, if I think about it, yes, it is very personal to me too, because I have to shelter. I still can't be around my family. Like, I do meet them outside at a huge distance at times.
Yeah.
I can't hug my parents, I can't just have a normal, gathering with them, or my brothers, anybody. I mean, and so that's so difficult. And I see people doing that all over the place.
Right.
Everybody else seems to be doing that. So yes, on that level, it's hurtful. I just have to be so careful because of my vulnerable patients. I can't take any chances.
Because you're a responsible human being, and you have compassion.
Right.
And that's,
well, thank you.
But that's what's shocking about what's happening now, is that there's this, you had hoped that people had this kind of empathy and compassion, given that we're all going through this global pandemic. But for some reason, that seems to be, sort of a divisive notion.
Right. And so much of what I think about, it being on a somewhat personal level, is that what you said is that, okay, a lot of it is young people who are out and about, and maybe because the mortality is not as high amongst young people, but then they're not thinking about the infectivity that they could transfer to somebody else, and eventually to their elderly relatives, friends, their friends, older parents, even if they don't have older parents. I mean, it just, the way this disease spreads, we have to be so tremendously cautious and to think really beyond our own little spheres. And that's really what bothers me, because like you said, these are the people who would be coming in to be treated by us. And many times by that point, there's very little we can do for them.
Right. Yeah. So what are you, I don't want you to say, oh, I'm going to look into my crystal ball. But again, from your level of expertise, and also because you are hands-on and you're seeing what's going on around you, what are you most afraid of at this point? I don't want to be a pessimist, but let's be a realist. Let's be realistic. Yeah.
This is real. I mean, I'm just afraid that this is just going to continue for longer than we had earlier expected. I think, in March and April, there was so much talk that this will be done by the summer. And then, okay, maybe there will be a second surge in the fall, but not so bad. And then we'll have a vaccine and blah, 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 and we'll be okay. But we're in the summer and it's increasing.
Yeah.
So to your point, that there's so much we don't know. And so my fears are that that this just continues well into next year. And with that comes how much more death.
Yeah.
How many more peaks in between? How many people can we not adequately care for due to lack of beds, lack of PPE, lack of health professionals who are undoubtedly going to be, affected as this goes on too.
Yeah.
So that's my fear, and that people are still not going to heed the advice to help to keep us safe. Again, we can't prevent it, but there's so much data that's shown, what masking can do, such a simple non-pharmacologic method.
Yep.
Things like that, if we just would really pay more attention, be more mindful, be more kind of caring about our larger community.
Yeah.
I think we can really help to mitigate this, but just the way it's looking now, that's what I fear.
Right.
Is that's going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of this BS that's being spread by people who say wearing a mask is unhealthy for you and it causes hypoxia and things like that. It's again, I'm not an expert. You are. That's totally untrue, right?
Right. I mean, sure, in some degree, it can affect our airflow. Like there was some study I read about exercising with a mask, and certainly there might be a very mild level of, let's say, a decrease in oxygen saturation or anything. I wouldn't even call it hypoxia because that means it's a much lower level. But there can be some minor effects. But just our normal activities of walking around, going into a store with a mask, things like that. Most people are not wearing a mask all day long.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, like you are, and you're fine.
all health professionals are, but non-health professionals are typically not really wearing it all day long. Okay, I should say grocery store workers, other really, truly essential workers who are also really putting themselves potentially in danger. They are. But, everybody else, you're wearing it maybe for a couple hours at most, then taking it off.
Right.
Things like that. No, I really don't think there's going to be a long-term effect from that. But I do think there's a likely long-term effect from getting COVID, even if you are fairly young and healthy. That to me is a much bigger risk than wearing a mask.
Yeah. I think somebody said, a doctor said, if you don't like wearing a mask, then you certainly aren't going to like wearing a ventilator. I mean, that's pretty much your choice here, right? And let me tell you about hypoxia. I went to Mount Everest. That's where you can't breathe because there's no oxygen, okay? And I survived, okay? So if you can wear a freaking mask just to save yourself and other people's lives, that's a small sacrifice to make. See, I could go off on this. It's just freaking ridiculous. So
no, you're so right. I trekked in Nepal a couple of years ago, not nearly to the elevation of Mount Everest, and it was really hard to breathe. And you're right, that was so much harder than wearing a regular cloth or surgical mask. No comparison. No comparison.
So I don't want to hear people bitching about wearing a mask for like an hour just because they have to go to the store or whatever. So, but let's hope that people start taking this a little bit more seriously, because again, I'm so fearful that it's become so divisive in the stupidest way when this is a health pandemic. Nothing but a health pandemic. It's a virus that has no rules, no boundaries, no political affiliations, no religious, nothing. There's nothing about it except that it just is a health concern that affects everyone.
Absolutely. You're so right. I mean, that is just also so mind-boggling that it's become a political issue. It's like, how can public health, be political? I mean, everybody's at risk. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you have. I mean, that is just so sad, because I think some people, to make their point, to make their political point, to stand on one side, are, even if they might have some doubt, but it's almost like you have to do that to kind of have this affiliation or something like that. And so they're really putting themselves at risk, even if they might know better. It's just that's why, unbelievable.
Yeah, that's why people have used the analogies like, why do you wear a seatbelt? Why do you have airbags in your car? These are all safety, items that keep you and others safe. And then, I use the analogy, well, then why do you turn on your headlights? It keeps you safe, but it also tells other people, that you're coming, right? So it keeps everyone safe. But I don't know why people think a mask is something that is taking away their freedom. It's an odd thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Meena, I love speaking with you, and I'm so glad we got to spend some time together on this. And I'm sad that we're talking about things getting worse. Oop. Okay, let me explain what happened at the end of that interview with Meena. Her Skype dropped out as I was saying goodbye to her. That's why you heard me and saw me go, because she dropped out and I couldn't get her back. But I was literally bringing that interview to a close. So thank you, Meena, for joining me. You're terrific. The work that you and Dr. Chen and Dr. Thum, all of you are heroes, of course, in all of our eyes. And I just pray and hope that you guys all stay safe. So as you guys can see and hear from the doctors, we're not at the end of this. We're in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it, and we still have a lot of risks ahead of us. And the fact that people are behaving as if the virus is gone and behaving in such a selfish way, on a daily basis, we're seeing this. People refusing to wear a mask and talking about their freedom. And, it's the ultimate in selfish behavior. And, what disappoints me the most and pisses me off is that it really is showing the ugliness of the freedom that people claim that America has and Americans, cherish. But you're using it for the most grotesque reason, just because you only care about yourself. I had a friend who mentioned to me that he had gone on a weekend trip with 7 people, in a shared condo. And then this was recent. And then the week after that, he went on a boat trip with like 14 people, half of whom he didn't know. So it wasn't in the quarantine bubble at all. And when I pressed him on it and I said, do you think about what this could possibly do to you and others? His response was, well, I'm not going to get it. I'll be healthy. I'm healthy, so I'm not going to get it. And I said, it's not just about you. It's about other people. And I had nothing more to say. I didn't know what else to say, because if people are going to continue living with blinders on, we need to do something about this, because we can't just accept it, right? We can't accept the fact that people are going to live selfishly this way and endanger everyone else around them. There was a recent story out of Michigan. At least 85 people connected with a visit to a Michigan bar tested positive for coronavirus. At least 85, because they packed into this bar and no one was wearing a mask. Recently here in LA, Hugo's Tacos, one of, it's a favorite place that people like to go to. They have a couple of different locations, but their Atwater Village location had to close down. Why? Because so many people were coming in without masks and being extremely rude, to the point of even, throwing water in the workers' faces who had asked them to wear a mask. So they finally put up a sign at their store. It said, "To our customers, our taco stands are exhausted by the constant conflicts over guests refusing to wear masks. Staff have been harassed, called names, and had objects and liquids thrown at them. A mask isn't symbolic of anything other than our desire to keep our staff healthy. Both our locations are going to take a break and recharge. We loved serving you for the last 15 years and hope the LA community comes together on this issue so we can feel safe and reopen soon. Please stay tuned to our website, hugostacos.com, and Hugo's Tacos on social media for reopening updates." They had to force themselves, they were forced to close down because of these people who came in without mask and throwing a hissy fit like a fucking little toddler. Okay, and this is happening everywhere. We see these videos, right? I saw a recent video at a Trader Joe's where a woman refused to put on a mask, and the the employees were trying to gently get her out of the store, explaining to her that she had to wear a mask. She just was screaming and shouting, and then threw her basket down on the ground and started marching out. And she just was pointing fingers at everyone, saying, you're infringing on my rights. I have a health condition, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she looked fucking ridiculous, right? Ultimate Karen, right? Ultimate Karen. There's another woman who did the same thing. She tried to check out. She had a grocery cart full of items. And when the cashier refused to check her out because she didn't have a mask, this woman started taking every item out of her cart and tossing it out of her cart, throwing it out of her cart, throwing a fit. My solution, it's just a suggestion. People need to be fined for not wearing a mask. I mean, seriously fined for not wearing a mask. Because here in California, at least, the governor of California said it's mandatory to wear a mask now, inside or out. But people also need to be fined for disturbing the peace. Like these women and these people in stores and, wreaking havoc. Disturbing the peace, attempted assault. If people are having things thrown at them, right? Workers are having things thrown at them. That's attempted assault. Vandalizing. That woman who was throwing her shit out of her grocery cart, that's vandalizing. So we don't, okay, we're calling these people out on video. I see that, the viral video. So that's a level of humiliation. But people actually need to feel some pain, right? People need to feel some pain, whether that is in the pocketbook or on their record or something, because we are obviously not mature enough as a society. We're not sophisticated enough. That's just what I've realized now, to be able to be responsible enough and compassionate enough. We have no sense of civic duty, which is what wearing a mask and taking these guidelines seriously really is all about. It's about not just yourself, but the greater good, greater society, helping the community. So people need to feel the pain some other way. And I mean, if they want COVID and they're willing to take the risk, well, that's their problem. However, it shouldn't become other people's problem because you're being so fucking selfish. Sorry, I've dropped the F-bomb a couple of times. My mom's not going to like this. Sorry, Mom. But you feel the same way too. We've had these discussions, so I know you feel the same way. Okay, well, listen, that's it for this episode. I hope you learned something from the doctors, and I hope those of you who are listening and watching, you heed these warnings and that you take responsibility, that you feel a sense of responsibility, okay, for yourself and others. We're never going to get through this if we don't come together on this and work together, okay? I know that there are others who just don't give a flying F. Okay, I won't say it again. But we have to do our best or else we're never going to get out of this. And you know what? We want to get out of this. We want to get out of this. All right? Okay, take care of yourselves. Stay safe and keep writing in. Keep supporting. I love hearing from you guys. And I love the fact that, more people are subscribing to the YouTube channel and, joining on Instagram, following on Instagram, Facebook, all of that. But spread the word, keep the support going. And to my warriors out there, keep up the good work, keep fighting the good fight, and we're all going to get through this together. Okay? All right. Take care.